Today, we're diving into the mysterious world of Plato's Allegory of the Cave and Quantum Superposition. Plato was a Greek philosopher who gave us the allegory of the cave. Imagine prisoners, held in a dark cave since birth, unable to see anything but the shadows on the wall in front of them. These shadows are cast by objects behind them, illuminated by a fire. To the prisoners, the shadows are their only reality. One prisoner escapes and steps outside the cave. At first, the sunlight blinds him, but as his eyes adjust, he sees the real world for the first time. He realizes that the shadows on the cave wall were just illusions. He returns to the cave to free the others, but they think he's crazy. They can't understand a reality beyond the shadows. This allegory represents our journey from ignorance to enlightenment. Plato suggests that true knowledge comes from understanding deeper truths beyond our immediate perceptions. Now, let's jump to quantum superposition. Quantum superposition is a principle of quantum mechanics where particles can exist in multiple states at once. Imagine a cat in a box with a poison that can be released by a quantum event. Until you open the box, the cat is both alive and dead. This is Schrödinger's cat, a famous thought experiment. Both Plato's cave and quantum superposition deal with perception and reality. In the cave, the prisoner's reality is limited to shadows. In the quantum world, reality is a blend of possibilities until observed. But here's where it gets fascinating. Plato believed in a sudden illumination, a leap from darkness to light, from ignorance to knowledge. Similarly, in quantum mechanics, measurement causes a sudden collapse from multiple possibilities to a single reality. Logical contradiction is forbidden by realism to be real in the actual existence domain. Think of the actual existence domain as the current reality you perceive daily. Here, real means something that exists and is true within this domain. In our tangible reality, two elements or states that deny each other cannot coexist at the same spatial and temporal location. Two objects cannot occupy the exact same spot at the same time according to the coordinates of space and the ticks of a clock. However, logical contradiction finds a home in the near-existence domain, a realm where all possible existences naturally and coherently reside. This domain is not yet physical. It is a space of potentiality, always referencing the future. In this domain, any interaction, relation, or observation collapses the superposition, selecting only one outcome, never both simultaneously in the same space and time. Consider the mind as an instance of a private, immaterial ego consciousness docked to a physical body, brain, and central nervous system. Illumination, enlightenment, and contemplation are private, sentient experiences where no separation remains between the mind, the immaterial ego consciousness, and the objects being observed. In these moments, a unity forms, a holistic connection between the observer and the observed, transcending the boundaries of physical and immaterial realities. Every human being who has experienced the illumination, enlightenment, contemplation, sentient feeling knows it with an unshakable certainty, more certain than knowing you are a real person occupying a physical body. This certainty surpasses even the empirical confirmation you might get by pinching yourself or asking someone else to pinch you. In this extraordinary state, the observer, the act of observing, and the objects being observed form a unique superposition. Imagine three distinct elements existing in a whole-on unity of wholeness. They are not in logical contradiction, yet they are not identical. In this superposition, they exist closer than touching, merging into a single entity. In this state, you, as an observer, transcend dualism. You experience a unity where all separation dissolves, a monism where everything is interconnected. However, the moment you return to your default ego consciousness, the separation reemerges. You perceive the dualistic nature of reality, understanding that you are distinct from everything and everyone else. This duality is not a contradiction, but a coexistence of two states, monism and dualism, within the same consciousness. In the default state of ego consciousness, you do not experience the oneness of monism. But during the illumination, enlightenment, contemplation, sentient feeling, you perceive everything as one. continuously reconfigured into a singular existence. In this state, you become ultimately simultaneous with superconsciousness, and superconsciousness with the eternal. Though it feels like identity, repeated exposure reveals your dualistic distinction, allowing you to move between monism and dualism, between ego consciousness and illumination, enlightenment, contemplation. This duality is a superposition within the near-existence domain, coherently hosting all possibilities. Interaction, relation, and observation resolve these superpositions, manifesting them into our actual existence domain. The laws of physics and the act of observing by consciousness resolve these superpositions, bringing forth the tangible reality we experience. True is the boundary between the elements of the superposition. In other words, the paradox of knowing and not knowing is resolved to either confirm or deny know and don't know. Discussing something is an instance of observing it, interacting with it, relating to it. This act of engagement resolves the superposition of knowing and not knowing. You either know something or you don't. These states cannot coexist in the same place at the same time. It is certain that you know your sentient feeling experience, but any abstract description of that experience is subject to errors, therefore uncertain. This transmission of information carries meaning, which must be encoded and decoded. What a genuine avatar shares is almost certainly justified knowledge, grounded in natural a priori axioms and sound logical inferences. They do not use these terms explicitly. They communicate coherent truths within the real limits of possible knowing. Know and don't know are the boundary limits of knowledge. The paradox of knowing and not knowing is a knowledge superposition. When a human being, including an avatar, returns to their default ego consciousness, docked to a unique physical body, brain, and central nervous system, there is much to discuss. For instance, how everything everywhere all at once exists and functions, and how the entire physical universe operates. However, the challenge lies in translating the truth value of the illumination, enlightenment, contemplation, sentient feeling experience so that the transmitted information retains its truth value. You must encode your abstract descriptions, and the receiver must decode them. All abstractions are subject to inconsistency and incompleteness. The experience itself, by tautology, is only and always itself, devoid of true or false. No one can question the authenticity of your illumination, enlightenment, contemplation, sentient feeling experience, but anyone can challenge your abstract description of it, and they almost certainly will. Often, the denial of the possibility of certain knowledge arises in discussions about God, the eternal, superconsciousness, aseity, divine simplicity, divine design, faith, apologetics, and the ineffable. In the illumination, enlightenment, contemplation, sentient feeling experience, where all separation is obliterated, there is nothing to discuss. No ego consciousness, no mind, no physical body or brain, no central nervous system docked to an ego consciousness, and no objects to discuss. Everything is exactly, only, and always one thing. Monism exactly itself. Ego consciousness cannot make monism do anything, nor can it alter monism in any way. Similarly, you cannot do anything with the eternal, nor can you make the eternal do anything. The same applies to God. You cannot make God do anything. Your only option is to be ultimately simultaneous with monism, the eternal, or God, literally closer than touching. Illumination, enlightenment, contemplation, sentient feeling experience is the experience of being ultimately simultaneous. We define now as the gestalt image of our whole physical universe. Superconsciousness perpetually encodes the meta-information, first information matrix as the now gestalt image. And that image is perpetually reconfigured by superconsciousness. Now is literally the perpetual reconfiguration of everything, everywhere, all at once. Now is not that which ceaselessly changes. Now is perpetual change itself. Any ego consciousness can and certainly does interact with now by looking and bestowing meaning upon it. Doing that is how ego consciousness creates and manifests physical reality by causing the decoherence of all superposition holon unities of wholeness. It is literally impossible for ego consciousness not to interact with now by looking and bestowing meaning upon it. Looking and bestowing meaning is necessary for every instance of ego consciousness. In other words, looking and bestowing meaning upon now is the primary identity function of ego consciousness. Furthermore, looking and bestowing meaning upon now is exactly how ego consciousness immaterial causality operates, empowering ego consciousness to create and manifest physical reality. Physicists talk with mathematical certainty about the physical because they understand some things very clearly, at least at the macro-size scale, where physical realism rules. However, at the quantum scale, what they assume to be physical behaves more like the immaterial. For the last 100 years, this has trapped physicists in a state akin to drowning in water. They have, and mostly remain, floundering, flabbergasted, flummoxed, stymied, stopped dead in their knowledge tracks by quantum mechanics' superposition, entanglement, wave-particle duality, and uncertainty. At the quantum size scale, things do not behave according to classical realism. For instance, at the quantum scale boundary of x35, the physical stops behaving in any way that is realistically predictable. At singularities, such as black holes, all laws of physics break down, and no mathematics can define, explain, or even coherently describe what is real. Within the total set of mathematical axioms, it is well known that each kind of mathematics has its own unique axioms that do not apply to any other kind. For instance, the set of axioms for Euclidean geometry is not applicable to the set of axioms for spherical geometry. In Euclidean geometry, no two parallel lines will ever intersect with each other. However, in spherical geometry, those parallel lines are necessarily forced to intersect with each other at the sphere boundary. There is no consensus among the 5 leading interpretations of quantum mechanics about exactly what superpositions are, where they exist, or how they behave. In fact, there is not even a consensus definition for a physical particle, notwithstanding that virtually all physicists agree that physical particles are everything. Virtually all physicists embrace the doctrine of physicalism, including the false metaphysical assumption of physical closure. We can get some clarity about all this confusion if we simply acknowledge that no one can predict the future. We can't predict the future because now is the perpetual reconfiguration of everything all at once. All the weirdness of quantum mechanics comes down to the fact that we can't predict the future because it has not occurred yet. All superpositions are literally out of time. They are also literally out of location. In fact, superpositions are not physical at all, but time and location are exactly only and always with reference to the physical. To grasp the elusive nature of reality and quantum mechanics, we must first acknowledge a fundamental truth. No one can predict the future. The future remains an enigma because now is the perpetual reconfiguration of everything all at once. The perplexities of quantum mechanics boil down to this simple fact. The future is unwritten, and thus unpredictable. Superpositions, those peculiar states of potentiality, exist outside of time and space. They are not physical entities, but immaterial possible existence objects, residing in what we can call the near-existence domain, a realm physicists often deny exists. This near-existence domain is the domain of potentiality, where objects and states are possible but not yet actual. Superpositions, therefore, are not physical yet. They are in a state of limbo, awaiting an interaction, relation, or observation to resolve their contradictory conditions into a coherent reality. Physicists often describe the electron not as a tangible object, but as a mathematical abstraction, a probability cloud existing in potentiality. This electron, in essence, represents a probability of existence, a possibility that could manifest in any specific location within the physical universe if observed. One cannot empirically observe this probability of possible existence, just as one cannot see a possible future object or state condition. Possible existence is the future, a mere shadow of what could be. In contrast, actual existence is the now. Now is the perpetual reconfiguration of everything, everywhere, all at once in the domain of actual existence. It is the 0 point where potentiality turns into actuality. Now is empty, akin to the mathematical symbol zero, existing and real, yet devoid of space and time. It is independent of both, a non-physical entity. Yet now is the blueprint, the meta-information, the first information from which all physical objects are derived. It is the source code for both space and time. Despite its emptiness, now holds the key to reality, the blueprint upon which all physical objects depend. In other words, now never stands still, and the arrow of time, once it began to run, does not stop for any human being until the whole universe ends. Time is a one-way arrow and cannot be reversed. For instance, any superposition with any generic interaction, relation, or observation with anything else is what causes the superposition to decohere, resolving into some specific actual physical object that is empirically observable, recordable, and measurable using mathematics like geometry, algebra, calculus, sets, categories, etc., but not probability. Probability only measures possible, never actual objects and events. Any generic interaction, relation, or observation of anything in the near-existence domain brings that thing into actual existence, and that action is perpetual. Imagine Plato's shadows on a cave wall projected from the reflected light of a fire. Generic interactions, relations, or observations include the operation of all laws of physics, and also include ego consciousness looking at and bestowing meaning upon now. Laws of physics cause the decoherence of anything in the near-existence domain, and consciousness looking does also. Physicists continue to grapple with what an observation is, and, therefore, what an observer is. They can't resolve their confusion because they deny that the immaterial category even exists. For instance, they deny that immaterial consciousness exists. So, they must invent imaginary observers that are physical objects. For instance, they claim physical particles are everything, or that physical objects interacting are everything, or that physical objects in relation with each other are everything. Think shadows on the cave wall are as real, fundamental, and elementary as the humans seeing them. That is the fatal logical error. Reification, which means mixing categories, claiming objects have properties, functions, and relations. But the category those objects are in does not have those properties, functions, and relations. They claim physical particles are observers. They insist that physical is necessary and sufficient to explain itself, and even more preposterously, they claim that physical can create itself out of nothing, which is also the fatal logical infinite regress error. The doctrine of physicalism, including the false metaphysical assumption of physical closure, is virally infected with fatal logical reification and infinite regress. It is a false theory. It is an irrational false theory. Particles are not observers. They are ontologically category-limited to interactors and relators. Only consciousness is an observer. Consciousness interpretation of quantum mechanics resolves all the weirdness of quantum mechanics. Physicists have not succeeded in explaining the weirdness away precisely because they cannot predict the future. Everything in possible existence has nothing physical in it yet. Therefore, it cannot be explained with either physics nor with any mathematics except probability. Probability can give some sort of description of possible existence, say the probability of which team will win a game of baseball, whether the flip of a coin will be either heads or tails, whether an electron will appear in one specific location or have some specific momentum as it propagates between two locations, or whether Schrödinger's cat will be found alive or dead, etc. No superposition has any actual time, actual location, actual momentum, actual mass, or actual extension in the emptiness of space in it, while it remains only a possibility of existence in the near-existence domain. It will only have those things once the superposition is resolved in the actual existence domain. We don't know what we don't know. For instance, we do not know possible existence inside the near-existence domain until we do. For instance, we know as we look at and bestow meaning upon now and transform the near-existence domain into the actual existence domain. We know as we create and manifest physical reality by the power of immaterial causality, by simply looking. Immaterial causality means immaterial consciousness causally interacts with physical objects, which can easily be empirically observed by any ego consciousness. I am communicating to you, the viewer, what I do know. or at least believe I do know. Quite naturally, that reveals what I don't know. For instance, if I know there are two shoes, each in a separate box, if I open one box, I instantly know which shoe, right or left, is in the other box. That is a good metaphor for how quantum entanglement works. If there is any interaction, relation, or observation of one quantum particle with spin-up, the other entangled particle necessarily has spin down. Physicists would not permit that there was any actual exchange of information between the two objects that are elements of a superposition. Say a spin-up quantum particle entangled with a spin-down quantum particle, and the two particles are on opposite sides of the universe, because that would be a clear violation of the speed of light limit, and a clear violation of Einstein's realism. Instantaneous is certainly faster than the speed of light. However, we infer that there is an instantaneous exchange of information without any violation of speed of light or realism. In fact, in any holon unity of wholeness, there is no relevance of physical distance of separation. The holon unity of wholeness of two entangled quantum particles as a single superposition unit is wholeness, even though there can be physical separation of any possible distance between the two particles. One whole object can certainly communicate with itself. Wholeness makes everywhere local for that whole object. Wholeness and locality must be redefined to include entangled objects in superposition separated by even vast physical distances inside the space boundary of our whole physical universe. The Illumination, Enlightenment, Contemplation, sentient feeling experience confirms the truth that exchange of information between objects that exist with physical separation is instantaneous. If objects are ultimately simultaneous, which means they literally exist inside each other closer than touching, those objects can certainly exchange information instantly faster than speed of light. If eternal, superconsciousness and in-self collective ego consciousness are ultimately simultaneous, they certainly are, then that permits instantaneous exchange of information faster than speed of light between them. The Illumination, Enlightenment, Contemplation sentient feeling experience includes exchange of information, therefore knowledge, instantly, think Plato, suddenly, like light kindled from a leaping spark. For instance, an ego-conscious human being instantly knows with certainty I am that, ultimately simultaneous with superconsciousness and eternal. When you return to standard ego consciousness, you do bring some information knowledge back with you. You know more than you did before the experience. You can report that knowledge just like you report your experience of what happened at a baseball game. When scientists say they can't know anything for sure with certainty, they don't literally mean they can't know anything with certainty. What they actually mean is that change is perpetual and that they cannot predict the next second, let alone the next light year. They are, in fact, certain that change is ceaseless, continuous, and uninterrupted. Scientists can know with virtual but not perfect certainty about the present because they experience it, and that experience is real and true. By tautology, that experience is exactly only and always itself. It is itself exactly, but only while it actually occurs. Before that moment, it is possible but not actual, and after that, it becomes memory or some kind of record, but not actual. On the other hand, they can't be sure about their abstraction, naming, describing, explaining, defining, and interpreting, because that is always, without exception, subject to being inconsistent and incomplete. Even immediately after an experience, no human can be certain they know the previous instant with exact, perfect, and certain clarity. Physicists know for sure a great deal, including concepts like quantum uncertainty, entanglement, superposition, wave-particle duality, and scattering. They talk as if they know what they are discussing, often using very precise axiomatic mathematical descriptions, because for the most part, they only talk about what they are sure of. Why would they discuss what they don't know as if they did know? Of course, they mention topics about which they know nothing, but that is not what talking about something means. Not only physicists, but ordinary people also tend to talk about what they do know, unless there is fraud, grifting, conning, thievery, intentional deception, or manipulation involved. Humans share information through words, spoken and written, through art, music, painting, dance, poetry, fiction, biography, non-fiction, sculpture, sports, theater, movies, and more. They talk like they know what they are talking about. Even people who claim it is impossible to know anything for sure, with certainty, seem to feel strongly, with certainty, about the truth of that belief. When someone shares information with you, communication, you have basically two options. 1. Agree with the information, or 2. Contradict that information with information of your own. However, justified knowledge cannot be defeated. If justified knowledge can be defeated, then it was never justified knowledge to begin with. In fact, people who have experienced the sentient feeling experience, illumination, enlightenment, contemplation, even the greatest avatars, talk like they know what they are talking about. Enlightened human beings share information about their contemplation experiences, like the following quote from Krishnamurti, even as they insist you can't be clear in your perception or knowledge if you look through the lenses of previous knowledge and experience. As we delve deeper into the nature of consciousness and reality, we come across the insights of Jiddu Krishnamurti, a philosopher who has extensively explored the realms of awareness and perception. Krishnamurti on contemplation. So what do we mean by an awareness? I am aware that I am conditioned. That is a fact. I am aware of it. I am conscious of it. I know it. What does that mean? Is there a separation between this awareness and the thing of which it is aware? Am I aware of my conditioning as an outsider looking in? One knows one is aggressive, in word, in feeling, in act. Does one know it as a knowledge, or does one communicate with that fact, not as an outsider, but as a communion established between the entity that is aware and the thing of which he is aware? You understand? I think it is very important to understand this. When I say I know I am conditioned. The word know is a very complex word. You have looked at your conditioning before and you have learnt something about it and you say, I know. But when you say, I know, you have already accumulated knowledge about it, and it is with that knowledge that you look. But the thing, the conditioning, must change in the meantime and does change. Therefore, to say, I know, is the most dangerous thing. To say, I know you, which is absurd, I know my wife, my husband, my children, my politician, my God, that is the last thing. When you say, I know you mean you know your wife, or your husband, or your friend, as of 2 or 3 days ago. But in the meantime, that friend, or husband, or wife has undergone a change. So to say, I know is wrong, if I may use that word. So knowledge prevents you from looking right? Now, can I look without the previous experience, without knowledge, so that I look with freshness, with newness? Life is a series of experiences, conscious or unconscious. These experiences, the various forms of influences, ideas, propaganda, all are pouring in and each leaves a mark. It is with these various hurts, marks, memories, as knowledge that I look. So my look is always spotted, never clear. Can I look at myself with eyes that have never been touched by experience? Do please follow this and do it, and you will see something. If I look at myself with the eyes of experience, with eyes that have looked at so many things, I have been through such tragedies, such thoughts, such despairs and sorrows, then those eyes never see anything clearly. Can the mind be free of all the past to look? Can the mind be aware of its conditioning? Can it look at it without any distortion, without any bias? That is the problem. Is it possible to look at anything? The tree, the cloud, the flower, the child, the face of a woman or a man, as though you are looking at it for the first time? That is really the central issue, real freedom to look. And freedom is to be free of the whole depth of the past. The past is the culture in which we have been brought up, the social, economic influences, the peculiar tendencies of each one of us, the impulses, the religious dogmas, beliefs. All of that is the past. And with that past, we try to look at ourselves, yet we ourselves are that past. There are two types of freedom, are there not? There is freedom from something. I am free from anger. Let us suppose, but the freedom from something is a reaction. Obviously, that is not freedom. To be free from one's nationality means absolutely nothing. A very intelligent man is free from that particular poison, but that does not constitute freedom at all. And there is a different kind of freedom, a state of mind in which there is no effort at all. Such freedom is love. It is not as when you say, I must learn to love, to practice love. I hate people, but I am going to struggle, make an attempt to love. That is not love. Freedom is a state of mind in which love is, and it is not the opposite of hate or jealousy or aggression. When we are dealing with opposites and trying to be free from one and achieve the other, then the other has its root in its own opposite, right? Through conflict, freedom cannot possibly be understood. We will come back to this question: what is it to be aware? Is there an awareness of that tree, of that cloud, of the green sparkling grass in the early morning? Is there an awareness of it without any choice, without any interference of thought or of knowledge which divides? We were saying the other day, do look at a tree or a cloud or whatever it is without space. Did you do it? To look at your wife or your husband or your girlfriend or boyfriend without the image. Have you ever tried it? Have you seen what its implications are and seen whether you can be free from these implications so that you can look? I think this is very important to understand and is the key to the whole thing. When there is no separation between the observer and the thing observed, there is no conflict, and therefore there is immediate action. I am aware that I am angry. The observer, if he is separate, sees anger as something apart from himself, outside of himself. When there is this division between the observer and the observer says, I must get rid of it. I must suppress it, or I must understand it. I must look to the cause of it, and so on and on. In that there is conflict, there is a state of disturbance, control, suppression, of yielding to it or rationalizing it, justifying it, and so on, which is all a waste of energy because of the conflict involved in it. But when the observer realizes he himself is the thing observed, then he sees that he is anger, not he himself and anger as two separate things. When he sees that he is anger, then there is no waste of energy. What actually takes place? What happens then? I see I am angry, that state you all know. I am not separate from the anger. I am anger, and I am aware of it. There is no division then what takes place. When there is no effort or struggle or contradiction or battle, there is only one thing, that which actually is. And what actually is myself, the observer who thought he was different from the observed. And there is only that fact, anger, jealousy, or whatever it is. And all the movement of contradictory thought has come to an end. Therefore, there is only perception, a seeing in which there is no division, no contradiction, and a new state of energy comes into being. This new state of energy is going to dispel that fact altogether. As we wrap up our video, remember you are someone linked with someone of you in the world.